man, that intro always puts me in a dancing mood. Welcome to welcome to the Thirsty Checkdown. We have a very special guest here. He is the face, and we will discuss that later. Tipp, my normal co-host, is not available right now. He had a work incident. He's fine, but it's going to take him a while to get here because of work issues. So JC is filling in for him till he gets here. And we're with Coop A Fiasco, Andrew Cooper, or as everybody knows him, Coop, except me. To me, he's the face. Coop, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I love what you guys do over here. Love the show. Wish Tipp could be here, but dude, JC's great dude, man. So good to finally get on with you guys because we've been playing this for a while. So thanks for having me.
Well, you're always welcome. For those that don't know, the face comes from an interaction I had with Coop at the Fantasy Football Expo, wearing the shirt, okay? You guys need to get to the Fantasy Football Expo because you'll meet people like JC and Coop. You'll meet me. I'll be there this year. You'll meet Bob Harris. I think Steve Cohen was there. I know that I saw Scotty Engel there. There's all kinds of people that are in the Hall of Fame or who should be in the Hall of Fame that are there. Andy Behrens was there. The girls from Game Changers were there. I met them there. So get to the expo. But what happened was Matt Deutsch recognized me. Is it Deutsch or Deutsch? It's Deutsch. Right. Yeah. Matt Deutsch recognized me. And I knew Matt from years before, but I didn't remember. It had just been a little bit too long. And we'd never really interacted much other than online. And we didn't have all this video stuff back then. It was all radio style or written articles and forum posts and stuff. So I knew who Matt was. And Coop and Matt came up and asked if they could interview me. They wanted to talk to me about fantasy football and kind of the history of it, which is what I'm doing this off season, is a history of fantasy football. And I hijacked their video and turned it into a Barry Sanders tribute, where I told people that Barry Sanders' dad did not believe Barry was the greatest running back in the history of the NFL. He thought it was Jim Brown. And that's absolutely a true story. But I'm sitting there talking to Matt and to Coop, and I said, okay, who's the face and who's the brains? And Coop had no idea what I was talking about. And I said, well, on every broadcast, you have the face that goes on the air, and you have the brains that's whispering in his ear. And so I said, Coop, since you're on the broadcast, you're the face. And he forgot all about that. That's
well, but we didn't forget about you. And that's the great thing about the expo, because we were out there to cover the drafts, the King's Classic, the Queen's Classic. They have all sorts of events there. And I'm sitting there talking to Matt Deutsch. We're talking about what we're going to say. And he goes, oh, that's Greg Kellogg over there. And I was like, what? Where? Like, because, the expo is, it's all types of different people. But I was like, what is it? Because you hadn't been there the years before. I was like, Hall of Fame, Greg Kellogg. He's like, dude, he's right there. I was like, all right, let's go. So we put everything on hold, had to talk to you, had to get some, because we had the cameras and stuff out. I was like, but the best part about it wasn't even what we got on camera, which was obviously great because you're great at this, but just having a chance to talk to you about the history of fantasy football, and you talking to me about, running out of a length of the phone cord while you're trying to, talk to your buddies late at night and not keep the wife up and stuff. And it's just things like that when I was, because, I've been playing for 20 years, right? Like I've been playing since I was like 15 years old, 14 years old. But I remember my dad playing, and they would go down to the local bar and do the picks there and mail in the picks and check the paper and all that. And just hearing you talk about that period really just brought me back to when I first, because I was a co-owner, right, of my dad's teams, really his teams, but it brought me back to that era of the, before the cordless phones and when you had to check the newspaper and, and when touchdowns were everything, right? And then now, of course, we got PPR and all that. So it just talking to you and talking to people within the industry that were there before my time, it's just amazing. And I'm glad you did do this podcast because you were kind of kicking it around at the time. And now it's a real thing, which is amazing.
JC is actually the one that made it happen, JC and Iggy. I'm not going to forget Iggy. Evan was behind the scenes, but I didn't really know Evan. I knew JC and Iggy because I met them at the expo, and we had talked maybe 2 or 3 weeks before. I want to ask you one question before I let JC chime in. I want to know, you said you started as a co-owner on your father's team, and you've been doing this for 20 years. Do you remember the actual year you started and how you did?
So I do remember the very first year I had my own team. So when I say co-owner, it's like, it's like your dad being like, you're my guy, right? You're my little buddy. But like, I wasn't doing too much, I wasn't really steering the boat, but I did take over my first team. A buddy of mine was like, oh, we're all playing fantasy football. And I was like, I don't really feel like it. And he goes, I already made you an account on Yahoo and I put you in the league. You are playing. And in fact, he named my team after a TV show at the time called The Wild Thornberrys. And that is still my team.
Let's go on Nickelodeon.
Nickelodeon, yeah. So I'm still the Wild Thornberrys. He's still the Whoville Who. That's 20 plus years now. Over 20 years. Yeah. So but I do remember that team. I actually did win my first year. And I went back and looked at my team, and none of us knew what we were doing. None of us. My final roster had 3 kickers on it, like Alindo Mare, all these guys. Like, yes. But yes, exactly. But I did. It was like 2000. I want to say it was like 2001 or so, and I had Marshall Falk, so it was going to be very difficult to beat me at that time.
I'm going to come in again before I let JC have his question, because I want to know something related to your response. When you were your dad's guy, did you ever change his mind on a player?
So, I was at that age. I will say this, that we did have to have my guy Ben Coates. So like that was one of those where it was like, before he would go down to the bar, he's like, who are we getting? And it was, obviously I was like, well, Jerry Rice. I just named the players I knew, which was a lot of Patriots because of where I live, and also just a lot of mega stars. And, and though we did talk about, who to start, and he always told me who we were rooting for. And when crazy plays would happen that affect fantasy, he would tell me. Like, I remember once Doug Flutie had a pass batted back to him that he caught. Yes. And he explained to me at the time why that play for fantasy football was on another level, because I think
reception, yardage.
Yeah. So he explained, and those, like, at that, way back then, like, it got into my mind, like, all these things. And then, it was funny that I kind of got away from that. I was playing football and basketball, all these things. So I didn't really, to me, it was like fantasy wasn't something that was on the forefront for me until my buddy was like, yeah, you're playing whether you want to or not. And then ever since then, I've been hooked.
JC, your turn.
Well, Tipp is here. I'm going to get Tipp in here real quick, but I want to say, like, what's one player that you remember drafting that, like, in your first year that, like, really left an impact on you? I mean, obviously, I know you're a tight end.
So
you're a big tight end guy. I know that. So I want to know why that, like, left a bit. If there's somebody that you drafted that left a big impact on you, you're like, all right, now I got to, like, start drafting, like, tight ends and, like, start looking at these prospects.
So I will say this, that early on for me, it wasn't the tight end thing really came. And I can tell the tight end thing for me, writing about them is down the line. And I can tell you as we progress through my career, if that's what you want to do, I can tell you about that in a little bit. But I do have a very early tight end memory. But again, maybe throughout my show, I'll just keep reaching into this.
Keep reaching into the bag. He's got this bag, this magic hat. He's reaching out.
I think I'm going to break into his house and steal some of that stuff.
Sometimes he's going to pull a rabbit out of here. There's going to be a rabbit.
One special tight end story, which was early on in my playing career when we knew what we were doing. There was one pick I did make where early on there was a rookie coming out of Hofstra, who that's how old it's been. They don't even have a school anymore. Although, Raheem Morris, the coach for now I believe he just got a new gig with the Panthers, right? So he was the coach at Hofstra, and they had a player, Marquise Colston, come out and get drafted by the Saints.
Yeah.
Well, at the time, there were teams that were looking at him to play tight end, and Yahoo incorrectly labeled him a tight end. So I drafted him that year. And even though he played one inline snap the entire year for the Saints. he finished as the tight end 1 in fantasy football, ahead of Tony Gonzalez, ahead of Antonio Gates, and I won the league. And with the money that I won, I went and got myself this right here.
Yeah.
So I still have this, the tight end 1 that should never have been, and of course he was never tight end eligible again. But yeah, and my buddies, they did not like that.
They were pissed.
They were pissed, yeah, because I was starting. Everyone else had. So it's funny that the big tight end memory is starting a tight end that wasn't actually a tight end, and we've been chasing that ever since with guys like Juwan Johnson and Darren Waller and all.
Yeah.
Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring Tip in real quick.
Yeah. Bring him
Thanks, JC.
Thanks, buddy. Good to see you.
Later, y'all. What's up, Tip?
Is Tip? Tip, you're muted.
Yeah.
There you go.
What's going on? What's going on?
Tip, my man.
Scoop, I gotta get the scoop. What's up, man?
What's up, brother? Good to see you, dude. Always a pleasure.
Sort of see.
Well,
Sort of
you
see.
can't see me because I'm in a dark room now. I'm driving my car right now. We had a hellacious day at work and internet issues, but hey, we're here with Coop. I'm here with my guy Greg. Greg, how are you?
I am great. Do you have a question for Coop about his history?
Yeah, it's so crazy. I was listening to a lot of his history, and I was like, there's no way Coop is over here talking about Olindo Mare being coached. I mean, the guy looks like he's probably, 27 years old? Like, what is he over here talking about all these old school players?
If he shaved, it'd be 14.
Yeah, that's the beard. The beard is it's a very important beard. It's a weight bearing beard. No, I actually this month I turned 35. I turned 35, and the funny thing about that is, I actually thought I was 34 for an entire year up until this time last year when somebody asked me how old I'm going to be, and I said I'm going to be 35, and my wife was like, "No, you're 34." And so this is actually my second year in a row of thinking I'm 34. So I will finally be moving on 35 years old this year. Thank you.
Hey, up until your birthday,
That's awesome,
I was twice your age.
Oh, there you go, dude. So yeah,
it's not funny.
That's awesome, man. I love it. I love. No, but you know what, Greg? You know what? You keep saying that you're an older guy. You're old. But you are hip. You're a hip old dude. I had the pleasure of going to Greg's house, and Greg comes out with his Hawaiian shirt and sandals, flip flops, chilling, hanging out, watching the draft with him. And I'm like, man, I just always get this cool vibe from Greg. He's always got a cool, calm, collective customer. But I love the Marquise Colston story. I remember Marquise Colston, man. That was a hell of a year because you could use him as a tight end eligible, and I did that in a couple of leagues, and it was fun, man. It was cool. I guess I always ask the question to all of the people that come on here, and again, appreciate you for coming on. But I always ask the question of who is that one person. It can be. I want to get one person that's not in the fantasy football industry, and one person that's in the fantasy football industry that you love to just destroy, beat them, talk smack, junk. I want to know who that is. And it's so cool because we get a lot of different answers. So I want to hear that from you.
Oh, for sure. So I got a guy, I got a close group of buddies, and one of them, my buddy Alex Gilday, he's like my right-hand man. He's like my Ernie Adams. For people that know Ernie Adams, he was with Bill Belichick all the way, and Bill Belichick was the face, and Ernie Adams was the brains. So my guy Alex, he's my behind-the-scenes guy. And we have another buddy, our buddy Madison, that is just the biggest trash talker. And again, these guys are outside the industry. And the worst thing that could possibly ever happen happened a couple of years ago, where he, in one league, went undefeated and had the most points for and points against. So the ultimate, and he reminds us every day. So anytime you can beat Madison, anytime you can, and he talks trash nonstop. Anytime I can beat that kid, that's my goal in life, to win trades versus him, beat him. So shout out Mad Dog. He really sticks it to us. So I appreciate him. In the industry, I think the person that I enjoy playing with the most is got to be Jordan Loop. For those that don't know, he's Cantaloupe on Twitter. He creates a lot of the avatars for the Avi makers, right? And this guy, I'll tell you, one of the funniest dudes there is, one of the most genuine dudes there is, and just knows how to have a good time with it. And he not only plays regular fantasy, but he plays IDP, all of it. Excellent IDP guy. Give this guy a follow. He's an absolute gem. But if you're adding somebody to a league, a guy that's engaged, a guy that's funny, a guy that's available, a guy that knows his stuff regardless of the format, Jordan Loop, absolute superstar. So got to give him a shout out.
Hey, I got to ask you about your history a little bit.
Sure.
Have you ever had one player on your team that had a huge impact on your season that everybody laughed at you for taking? Now, for me, that was Aronde Gadsden. If you remember Aronde,
Yeah.
I won Fanex because of Aronde Gadsden.
Yeah, so his son is actually I'm not sure if you saw, he's at Syracuse, and he's a wide receiver that became a tight end, Aronde Gadsden too, and he's coming out next year. So keep your eye out for him. Not to make you feel old again, Greg, but yeah, Aronde
You do, but it's okay.
Aronde Gadsden's son now coming out. Yeah, I mean I'd say the number one guy throughout this time period was Evan Engram, 100%, because there were so many times I believed in the talent, I believed in the speed, the ability, and if you look at it, with Eli Manning, he was a top 5 tight end, and then with Daniel Jones, it wasn't happening, it wasn't there. But with Trevor Lawrence in back-to-back years now, he has been a top 5 tight end. In fact, last year he led all tight ends in receptions and had 19 more receptions than any other tight end. It was top 5 in receptions for any position. And Evan Engram, I stuck with him all throughout. And again, the fantasy industry isn't just Twitter. A lot of people think that that's the whole thing, but some of the greatest analysts aren't even on Twitter. Sean Siegel, who invented Zero RB, is not on Twitter. But on Twitter, I took a beating. Just saying, go get Evan Engram in your dynasty leagues. Draft Evan Engram. The year before last, when he was going off the board outside the top 20 tight ends, I said, this guy is top 5 upside. Go out and get this guy. And, I lost a lot of Giants fans followers for, basically saying that Daniel Jones wasn't it and that this guy was good. And that's why he was going to Pro Bowls. People telling me this guy can't catch. Apparently he can catch because he just had a zillion receptions, right? That was the one guy that I stuck with all along, regardless of what people say. And at the end of the day, Evan Engram, that's my guy. It worked out.
Okay, where did you first start writing for? Because I assume you wrote before you started podcasting. That seems to be the path.
Yeah, I'm a throwback. Honestly, I know you say I look young or whatever, but I've been writing for a long time, and I still prefer writing over everything. All my takes come from writing. It's something that I learned from watching and listening to JJ Zachariason, where he goes out and he writes first. That's what I do. I do the research and write, and I take that, and that turns into the info for podcasts. It turns into the tweets. It turns into the info for Sirius XM radio shows. That's where all my stuff comes from. Without the writing, I wouldn't have. I've tried to do shows without writing, and that's where all my ideas come from. So for me, the writing is always part of it. And for those out there that are looking to get in this industry, here's how it happened for me: is I went on this forum called Reddit, and now it's a huge website, everything. But we had a small community 12 years ago when I started on there, and I would just write comments, right? And I would do the research and write these comments. And then people started saying, hey, these comments are really good. You should make your own post, right? So the way the website works is you post things, either you type things or post an article, and then people comment on it. So I was in the comments just commenting. People were like, make your own post. And I started making my own posts. And eventually I talked to, I ran into some people that were like, this should be published on websites. And then, a friend of mine, John and Pemba, helped me get a job with a different site, and then eventually brought me to Fantasy Alarm. And I would take those articles and I would just post them on Reddit. It's the same thing I was writing on Reddit, just on a different page, and then I would post it there and people would comment. And that's where we got to where we are now. And I wouldn't be doing podcasts if it wasn't for the Scott Fish Bowl. The Scott Fish Bowl, I ran into a group of people in my first Scott Fish Bowl in a chat. Kevin Tompkins, Jordan Loop, JB Barry, and Linda Godfrey, Lindellians on Twitter. And they said to me, let's do a podcast. And I was like, I know nothing about that. And they said, we'll get a mic and we'll just do it. So I did. And I originally I took an ironing board and I put my mic on top of that. That was my mic stand. And we just started a podcast talking about football and all this. And now it's what I do for work. So anybody out there, my advice is start go to Reddit. That's my advice, because where else can you post something where people will read it? I'm on there every day. If you post something, I will read it. And you don't get that opportunity in a lot of places. And you can hone your craft and get better. And if people like it, then you're in. Then you're doing it. And then you find a way to take that and send it to websites and send it to whatever, and potentially get a job doing this, because that's what I did. And at the time, I was just doing it for the love of the game. I didn't know where it was. I just like talking about football. That's all,
I couldn't agree more. I've always, and to me, I got paid by Fox Sports the year I worked for them, naturally, because it was a full-time job, and I got paid well for them. They gave me $60,000 a year, and I was working in computers for $40,000 before they hired me. But they got me to move from Atlanta to California, so I needed more money to live in California because I had a family. But that said, the very first magazine article I wrote, I don't remember if it was for Ian Allen or Emil Cadlick, or I think it was Ian or Emil, and they paid me $50 for the article, which was great. I mean, to me, I take my wife out to dinner, no big deal. The second year, I asked for 5 copies of the magazine so I could give it to my mom and dad, because they could see their son got published in a magazine they could buy at their local grocery store. To me, it was always more about expanding the hobby and hearing myself talk, to be honest. I mean, I realized that I'm going to be wrong 40% of the time minimum. I mean, because it's just that kind of business. That said, I love Matt Waldman. I love Bob Harris. Who do you think is the sharpest of the online presences other than yourself?
Yeah. So for the people that, because again, there's so many different eras, right, that you grow up
Right.
and check out. For me, the guys that I grew up, or when I first really got serious about it, the guys that I most listened to and liked were JJ Zacharyson, who I believe is the best right now. He's won multiple Writer of the Year awards. I love the approach for Dwayne McFarland. He has a very mathematical approach to it. And I also really enjoy Rich Rebar. And again, these are guys that, Rich Rebar created the quote unquote Konami code mobile quarterback trend that everyone's looking at now. So there's a million names I could name for different reasons I like them. People that got me into that I would never do podcasting if it wasn't for a guy like Matt Kelly over at Player Profiler. There's just so many different guys, but those 3 guys are guys that I always I follow them, especially because even when I disagree with them, I understand why they're saying what they're saying. I understand their process. And I encourage people to do that with my work too, which is why I always put the good and the bad in all my articles with the tight end stuff, because then you can make the decision for yourself. I'm going to give you all the information. You make the call. And I love that about all 3 of those guys I named, 4 if you count Matt Kelly, because they give you the information and they never say, I know for sure. They say, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and hopefully it works out.
I think that's a brilliant approach. Tipp, Spack? Tipp, take 2.
Yeah. So, Coop, you talked about that word that starts with the letter R, research. And, when I first started talking to Greg about, doing, fantasy football content, things like that, I was doing it before, but I was doing the research, right? And can you talk to everybody about how important doing the research is? Because then once you do the research, to me, once you do the research, you can spin it any way you want to spin it. And that kind of goes to where you were talking about earlier, or just a moment ago, where you may not agree with somebody, but you understand where they're coming from. So can you just talk about how important doing the research is? Because, you've got trolls out there. Trolls, they like to come from under the bridge and they like to come and get at you. But just talk to us about the research process for you.
Yeah, and the thing is, research is the cure to the trolls. It really is. I just want anybody watching this to know that if you go and look at my timeline on Twitter, anytime I tweet something, there's hours of research behind that. And if you look at the responses and comments to that, you'll see that I don't post anything unless I'm confident in it. And I have the arguments already thought of. And I think that's a big part of coming from Reddit because there's a lot of arguments there. But it's everything to and again, the way that I think of it is this. I've had so many jobs where I walked into the job and I felt imposter syndrome. I felt like I don't know what I'm doing. I shouldn't be here. Pretty much every job I've had except two. Painting houses, which, I have long arms, so I felt pretty qualified for that. And this job, right? And with this job, I always feel prepared for a show like this or any other show because I've done the work in advance because I want to do the work and I take it very seriously and I'm very passionate about it. And when you do that, it's so easy to get by the trolls and being wrong as well, right? Because whether a job has you do your work all week and there's a test every Sunday where you get all the answers and you're not going to get them all right. So for me, the research is huge. And I would suggest to people the biggest thing is find a community, whether that's Reddit, whether that's Twitter, whether that's your group of friends, whether that's DMs, because most the inspiration for the articles I write and the things I do are being part of communities and discussing football and talking about football. And eventually you get to a question and you don't have the answer to that question. And you say to yourself, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out this question. And you do the research on that. And then you come back with whatever it is, whether it went the way you thought it was going to or not, and you publish that. And that's how I've come up with the formula for tight ends. And that's how when you go to my page and you go to our thing, it's basically just writing. It's writing about the things that are either going on in the NFL or questions that I wanted the answer to. That's the big thing behind the research. And it's going to make you a better fantasy gamer. And it's going to give you an edge. And it's going to give everyone that follows you and listens to you an edge.
I love how you said that. I love how you said that doing the research prepares you for the people that are going to, get you set up for rebuttals or maybe the, trolls or things like that. I love it because you say when you put in the works, however many hours it is for that research, then you're able to come up with scenarios that people are going to try to counteract you with. And you say, oh no, I already
done that.
Had that thought process in my head, when I thought about putting it out. So I love how you said that, man. I appreciate that. Greg, go ahead.
It separates. I just want to say it separates the hot take artists on Twitter and whatever from the people that know their stuff, because the perfect take to me is one where it goes against the grain, but you truly believe it. There's a lot of people out there that will just throw things out there because it's going to get people excited. It's going to get you engagement. And they don't even respond to the trolls. They're just basically trying to get engagement numbers. That's not what I do. If I go through my process and I look at, consensus and I look at mine and I'm above or below consensus on a player and I truly believe that, I'll tweet that because I know people are going to want to ask why. And if they want to be mean, absolutely on my timeline, say whatever you want to say, but just know that you're walking into an absolute trap and I will tear your face off. with the correct information because I have, right? I don't post that stuff unless I already have.
People who prepare do not have to fear the trolls. They just don't. Now, one thing that I have told everyone that ever wrote for me, I used to run comments.com, a website to help young writers get a foothold in the industry, is credibility is everything. And I find that the easiest way to lose credibility is with misspelling or with bad grammar. It doesn't matter how good your logic is. If you don't take the time to spell check and check the grammar of your work, editors are hugely important in my career. And I would assume you've had your run-ins with editors too that wanted you to, maybe if you said it this way, your point is good, but maybe you need to say it this way rather than that way. Would you agree, or do you think editors are overvalued?
No, I think they're crucial. They're crucial in today's age, and of course I butt heads with editors, right? And the trick to not butting heads with your editors that I've found is to embrace what needs to be done and make sure everything is done in your voice. So for me, when I go in, I know that we need to worry about search engine optimization and our overlords at Google. So when I go in, I say, okay, I don't want the editor to put it to force the words rankings or fantasy football or whatever into my writing. I'm going to weave it into my writing in a way that is entertaining and is in my voice and has correct grammar and correct spelling, as you're saying, Greg, so that when the editor goes in, the only things they need to correct are the grammar and spelling. They don't need to correct any of the content, right? And I've also learned on top of that I'm very passionate about this, but not every person is going to want to read 5,000 words on tight end.
No, really?
Surprisingly, not every person wants to read 5,000 words on tight ends. So you got to give them a reason to read, right? Like when you
first paragraph.
With the first paragraph, I always come in hot, and with mine, I always mix in a joke. I would put in GIFs and memes and whatever else. Like because I've learned that myself. If I'm reading an article and I see there's like a funny picture or something, a couple paragraphs down, well, I'm gonna at least read down and see what that picture is all about, right? I'll make it down that far, and then once you get that far, you get to here's another tight end here. Might as well see what's going on with TJ Hawkinson. And as they scroll, look, there's another joke it looks like down there. And you make an enjoyable experience for the people. That's the most difficult part of this industry, is that all the way down to the very bottom of the NFL, it's entertainment, right? Scouts are talent scouts. They are scouting for talented players to be part of this entertainment system. So you could be the smartest, best fantasy analyst in the world, and there will be an audience for it, but you have to offer some level of entertainment. You truly do, because at the end of the day, the people are playing this game and they're watching football for entertainment. So just embrace that part of the cycle, and you'll be better off for it.
Matt Berry is in the Hall of Fame because he was funny.
Funny, man.
He was, when he started writing fantasy football, he was not that good of an analyst. He just wasn't. But he was hilarious. He was funny. And over the years, he's honed his analytical skills. So now he's still funny, but now he makes good points within his humor. I think that's tremendously important.
Huge.
And I really like Matt. I really do. I think most people, and I've said it often, my audience knows, if you last 10 years in this industry, you're a good person, because the bad ones get weeded out, because nobody will have anything to do with the bad ones.
Yeah. Can I say something on Matthew Berry real quick? That
sure.
I see that he gets a lot of hate. And again, I don't really need to defend a guy that has 1 million followers and was in a Marvel movie, but he gets a lot of hate from people that are in the industry and people that love this game, which to me is silly, because
I love him.
He's regardless of what you think about him and his content or as a person, he's a tremendous ambassador for what we do. Right now, he's at the very top. He is on TV on Sunday talking about fantasy football. The higher that Matthew Berry goes at the very top, the higher he raises the ceiling for all of us. The more mainstream he makes this a hobby that we have, the better it is for everyone. So I will never disparage Matthew Berry, even if I disagree with his takes or whatever else.
Coop, you disagree with my takes. I disagree with your takes. That's the nature of the business. Now, Matt is a tremendously good guy. That's what people don't understand. I was fortunate enough to go into the Hall of Fame with Matt and with Scott Engel and with Eric Carabell and with Greg Ambrosius.
What a squad.
And I thought Bob Harris should have gone ahead of me, to be honest, because Bob taught me everything I knew. But Bob said something that really struck a chord with me. Back in the day, we had to search for information. Nowadays, we have to filter information. You watch all the analysts on the podcast, and so many of them are using micro analytics that did not exist in the 2000s. You couldn't average depth of target. What the hell's that? ADOT was never talked about back in the 2000s, and how important is it? Old school guy. You mentioned the gentleman who came up with 0 RB draft strategy. Sorry, I'm old school. I will never draft 0 RB. Just won't happen.
And you will never win, Greg, either.
Oh, yes, I will.
A lot of trophies sitting behind him, Tipp. I don't know.
Yeah, well, those are virtual. That's a virtual background.
I'm sure you got plenty of trophies to your name.
Well, I've won plenty of leagues. I won FanX, and that's against the best in the business at the time. So, I beat guys like John Hansen and Steve Cohen, who were a team and probably the best fantasy team I've ever seen. I've beat Bob Harris. So I'm not really concerned about winning as much as I am expanding. And if you could give advice to a guy that wants to start a podcast but doesn't really want to write, how much research do you think they should do before they say a word on camera?
So that again, I'll go back to JJ Zacharisi because I've gotten a lot. I've learned a lot from watching.
I want to meet him, by the way. So if we're at the expo and he's there, introduce me.
You got to talk. Yeah, you got to meet him. So at the FSGA, he actually did him and Adam Bernard and a few people did a talk on podcasting. You know, they talked about the actual equipment and the setup, but the thing that he said that stuck with me was there's just so many people that jump into it and think that I'll just talk about football or whatever, and they just jump right in and it putters out. Plan well in advance what you're going to do, and if you're going to be somebody that records them and not does them live, have a plan on what those are going to be, and maybe even record a good number of them in advance and then put them out, you know, bing bang boom as you go.
It's got to be on the schedule.
You have them stocked up and you have them on schedule. Yeah, because here's the thing is there's a million podcasts out there where people just talk about football, right? Having a plan and having a schedule and having an approach is everything. And if you can also have a niche or an angle, that's also huge. Now, again, people worry that they're going to get pigeonholed into this or that, but you have to remember, Denny Carter was originally the kicker guy, and like he did it half as a joke, but then he took it very seriously. And then people realized because they followed him as the kicker guy that this guy was sharp and he knew all the positions: running back, wide receiver, tight end. And now no one even thinks of him as the kicker guy anymore, but he was, right?
Are you the tight end guy?
Well, to a lot of people, I am. But as people get and become they become Fantasy Line members, they start realizing that, I have my rankings on our website, and they go through and they, today I updated my top 75 dynasty running backs, top 100 dynasty running backs. I have a top 240 rankings for best ball available in our best ball cheat sheet now that just came out. And you can grab that now as a standalone product. You don't have to be a Fantasy Line member. Top 240 players with both a grid and the rankings. I have everything. I do our redraft rankings. I do our weekly rankings. I care deeply about it, and it's not just about tight ends. The tight end stuff goes out for free for the most part because that's how I started, and that's what people depend on me for, and I do take it very seriously, and I do believe I'm one of the best, if not the best in the industry at that position. But if you listen to my stuff and check out my podcast, I think you'll find that at all positions, I have something worth adding. And for me, I never would be in this spot if I didn't become the tight end guy and something that people rely on. So if you can find some sort of edge, whether it be the guy that makes trade charts like Peaked in High School, the current kicker person, Lindelian's on Twitter, right? There's so many different people that do different things. John Bosch does the FC Eliminators, all these different things. If you can find some sort of niche where people will remember you and people will come back to you every August and say, oh, got to check in with this guy because he's got this one thing, or this woman because she has this one thing. It's going to be that much easier for you if you do have a niche or something like that. It's not necessary, but it helps you to has staying power. People say, who was that guy that did that one thing? Who was that woman that had that particular show? If you have that going for you, it's going to help you out a lot.
Tipp?
Greg, I love you, but you need to come to the dark side and just start doing the zero RB theory, man.
Couple,
but no,
do
we had a
do
lot
a
of great
couple.
things.
Not going to happen.
We talked about Matthew Berry.
I've migrated from stud running back to hero running back.
Okay, he's getting there.
I'm still going to get one early.
He's getting close. He's getting close. I will say this in your defense, Craig. There's a lot of guys that really push the zero RB, especially in the best ball. Shout out to a couple guys that I really, enjoy. Pete Overzet and Pat Carrain and that crew. The ship chasing guys over there. Deposit Kingdom, right? Pete Overzet's a Boston guy. Shout out to him. But to your point, Greg, Pat Carrain did actually win Best Ball Mania the year before last, but he did it with hero RB. Of all the teams he drafted, he had a lot of zero RB teams. That one team, he took Austin Eckler in the first round, and that's how he won $1 million. So, even the zero RB guy is going to mix in some RBs from time to time.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, and I just wanted to kind of go back because we talked a lot about Matthew Berry. I mean, his love-hate articles, even to this day, they are just gut busters. They're hilarious, but they give you a lot of great information. And I go back and I look,
and that's his thing. That's the thing that
niche,
you count on him for, you depend on him for, and you say
Absolutely.
every year it's going to be there.
Absolutely. Now, and I go back and I look at Greg's articles, and Greg's articles may not have been as funny, but they were very informative. Gives you a lot of great information. And that's what he's taught. He said, hey, go out there, try to find your niche, or so to speak. And we would be remiss by not talking about your niche, tight ends. I know you knew a lot of different rankings and things like that, but we got to talk tight ends. Last year, you came on a space with Bob Harris and myself on Twitter. Again, man, appreciate you for doing that, dude. You showed so much love, and that was awesome. And, Bob brought you on, and we brought you on, and we talked about the tight end to play for that week. And you said, although you were a week off, you said play Stone Smart. And I was like, oh, snap. I was like, okay. Then about a week or two later, he scored a touchdown in a game and did pretty well. So we want to talk to the audience about a tight end that they should be looking at now that draft season is upon us. You should be at least not, if you're not mock drafting, you've probably done a couple of drafts already. We want to talk to you about some tight ends that we should be looking at. Not any of the big tier guys. We want to get some of those gems that we could find. And we want you to tell us about yours first. Greg has one, and then I'll go last.
Yeah, I mean, so I have an article that I update every year. It's called What Makes an Elite Tight End. If you Google Fantasy Alarm or Andrew Cooper, what makes an elite tight end, it'll come up. It was nominated for the FSWA Article of the Year. Didn't win because Brian Drake had an incredible article about him and his son that I encourage you to read. His is a lot more fun to read than mine. Mine's a little more kind of boring tight end stuff. But in that article, I point out some of the keys to upside. And if I had to just take a note card and write one thing on it as the cheat code, it would be to be a top 2 target on your team. That's kind of a huge barrier to entry. Either lead your team in targets or be top 2. Virtually every high-end tight end that's finished top 5 has been a top 10 target on their team. In fact, going back to 2003, 20-year now sample size, every tight end that's finished top 5 has had either 90-plus targets or 10-plus touchdowns. The last one that didn't was Randy McMichael. How's that for a name for you, Greg, in the Wayback Machine?
It's way back.
Yeah. So, and again, it's very rare for a guy to have 10 touchdowns and not have 90 targets and finish top 5. And even when they do, they're inconsistent for week to week, like Robert Tonyan was. So we're looking for those targets, right? For me to give you a name of a guy that can kind of sneak under the radar is I look around at teams where we don't know who's going to lead the team in targets, right? Especially when there's big changes going on, new offenses, new quarterbacks, right? We don't know who's going to lead the team in targets, and we have some reason to believe the tight end has that opportunity, right? So I look at a team like the New England Patriots, right? Brand new quarterback coming in, brand new offensive coordinator coming in, and they got Demario Douglas. They now have a couple rookies. Devontae Parker's gone. KJ Osborne's coming in for like $4 million, which isn't that much. We don't know where they're going to go with the ball, but we do know this.
Ramondre.
Yeah, Ramondre, of course. I mean, Zeke Elliott had 65 targets last year. I mean, like they kind of had no identity, right? But I want to ask you guys a question. And again, you probably don't know the answer off the top of your head, but to just throw a number out there. How many screens do you think the New England Patriots threw to the tight end last season? Just take a guess.
I'd say 20.
I would say 40.
It's not a big number, I don't think.
0.
Oh.
Not a single tight end screen was thrown. Not a single screen was thrown to the tight end last season by the Patriots. The offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt, coming in from the Browns threw the second most in the league to the tight end. David Njoku had 21 by himself. So we've got this guy who's historically been pretty good versus man-to-man. He's been good in the red area, right? He's good at creating space and scoring.
Give us his name.
Hunter Henry. for the New England Patriots. Didn't I say Hunter Henry?
You
Hunter
didn't
Henry
say the name, man.
for Hunter Henry for the New England Patriots has an opportunity. He's already good versus man-to-man. He's already good in the red zone. You get him a few extra manufactured touches in this offense, he could be a guy that comes out and either gets 10 touchdowns or 90-plus targets. And that's all we're asking for in this world. And he's not a guy that people are making a priority in any format. So that's a guy that fits the bill, although many guys fit that bill.
Okay, so
yeah, no, I love it. I love, you know, the impact that, you know, Drake May is gonna have to have. He's gonna have to rely on his security blanket. That offensive line is not good, so he's gonna have to get really quick passes off. So no, I appreciate that. Greg, I'm sorry, you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I love Kyle Pitts because of Kirk Cousins, but I don't know if Kirk Cousins is going to be ready to play. But the problem is we want guys that they haven't heard of, that the fans can take a flyer on with the last pick in the draft or as a free agent. Hunter Henry, you can get late. You can get him very late. I'm going with Johnny Munt. And other than JC, I bet nobody knows who he is.
Tell us who he is, Greg.
He's the backup in Minnesota, and he's a receiving style tight end, which I like. And I don't believe Hawkinson's going to be back for half a year. I think he's going to late October, early November, and Munt could build a name for himself early in the year. And then when you start hearing rumors of Hawkinson coming back, you drop him. Now, why do I like him? Because I've watched 2 years every game of Michigan. And I've watched J.J. McCarthy use Eric Hall. I've watched him use Colston Loveland. Remember that name because next year or the year after, he's going to be a top tight end coming out. I've watched him.
Luke Schoonmaker got drafted.
Pardon me?
Luke Schoonmaker also drafted out of there.
Schoonmaker, that's right. Last year got drafted. Michigan doesn't throw the ball a lot, but they spread it out. And I know that JJ can make all the throws. The guy's a 5-star in high school. He did not come in. And if you go, everybody says, well, he didn't show anything at Michigan. He wasn't asked to. But look at the last 5 minutes of the Alabama game and tell me he didn't show anything. They were down 7. He marched them 75 yards to the tying score. Did he have help? Sure, he did. He had Blake Corum. He had Roman Wilson. He had his own legs. He used a full thing. He makes secondary and tertiary reads. He can make all the throws. I believe he starts from day one at Minnesota. I believe the thing against Munt is the fact that Minnesota has very good wide receivers, and Aaron Jones is a very good receiving running back. So I'm not expecting Munt to get 10 targets a game. But if he gets 5 or 6, he's more valuable than half the tight ends in the league.
Of course. I mean, 5 or 6 targets a game is
4 or 5 receptions.
We're talking 8. That's 90 targets in that range, right? Like that's what we're talking about. And I was shocked personally, and I see JC said in the chat he thought Josh Oliver was the guy. Johnny Munt actually was with Kevin O'Connell back with the Rams, and with that team, he was playing kind of in a blocking capacity. So I didn't think he had that in him. But this is what I tell
2 games last year. Look at what he did in his 2 games last year.
He was ahead. He was running more routes than Josh Oliver, and that's a big key when you're looking at these ambiguous rooms. Is you have to understand that the modern tight end is a tight end room. It's very rare to have a linear depth chart where just one guy plays and the other guy doesn't play at all. Even with the Chiefs, if you look at that team, Noah Gray plays like 50% of the snaps, right? They use multiple guys. So you have to look at the room and ask yourself, put yourself as the tight end coach. And I'm sure, most tight end coaches probably sit there with glasses like this, big meatballs, and they look in and they say, okay, this guy's going to block, that guy's going to run the routes, this guy's going to bring out the Gatorade. That's how they do it. So when I look at, we can go through a bunch of ambiguous teams and ask ourselves those questions, like the Packers. If you were the Packers coach, tight end coach, who is more conducive to running routes? Who's more conducive to blocking out of Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave?
Well, I kind of like Musgrave in the passing game, actually.
So do I. So in that sense, if they're going to use 2 tight ends, Luke Musgrave is probably going to run more routes, and Tucker Kraft is probably going to do more blocking. It's the same thing that happened with Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. Dallas Goedert was a good pass catcher. Zach Ertz was a good pass catcher. But Dallas Goedert was a much better blocker. So Zach Ertz got to play the slot and run all the routes when they were on the same team. So you got to look around and ask who's going to do what. Because in a lot of cases, sometimes being worse at blocking might actually help you a little bit in fantasy football.
There's a lot of 12 and 22 formations nowadays, too, where there's 2 tight ends on the field. Before we go to tips, because I'm really looking forward to that, I want to ask your opinion of Dalton Kincaid this year with all the receiver losses in Buffalo.
I got a stack of Dalton Kincaid rookie cards. Look, I just reached over and grabbed. There's one right there. Let's see. Here's another one. Here's another one. I'm investing in Dalton Kincaid across the board in my dynasty leagues and rookie cards, whatever it's got to be, because I think this guy I think he's a great player. I think he can be a Zach Ertz type player where if he gets the right number of targets, right, he can have the big upside. He doesn't have crazy breakaway speed like Kyle Pitts or George Kittle. So he's not going to have 1,000 yards on 60 receptions the way Kittle or Pitts have had. But with a guy like Zach Ertz ran a 4.74, but he earned 120, 150 targets in 1 year. And I think with Stephon Diggs gone, a guy that's gotten 150 targets in 4 straight years and led the team in first downs, somebody else is going to have to get those first downs. In fantasy, in real life football, there's 2 things that matter, right, Greg? Touchdowns and first downs. And I guess if you can't get that, converting the field goal, but it's such an afterthought. All that matters is get that first down, convert that touchdown. And somebody's going to have to step up on that team, whether it's Curtis Samuel or Keon Coleman or Khalil Shakir, but I don't really like Shakir that much, to be honest. But
Coleman's a rookie.
Coleman's a rookie. The ball's got to go somewhere, and the ball's got to go somewhere on third down. And if you could be that guy, which I think Dalton Kincaid can, Trey Bone.
All right, Tipp, you got to tell us who your guy is.
Well, first of all, Greg, I really love the Munn pick. That is thinking outside of the box. That is thinking ahead of the curve. And again, it's one of those guys that you could get off of waivers after your draft or very, very, very late in rounds. And he might turn into something. And I love that. So for me, guys, I go and look at a team that has changed their identity. So they've gotten rid of a couple of wide receivers because of age and because of injury history. So I go to LA. I go to the Chargers and I take a look at them and I say, well, you got Keenan Allen, who had 150 targets last year before he got hurt. I mean, was on pace to probably get 200 plus targets. It was crazy. And then you had Mike Williams gone as well this offseason. And then you got, it's not Stone Smart. You got Donald Parham there. And that's my guy. That's the guy I'm looking at. And here's another reason why. They got rid of Gerald Everett. He's gone. They've got rid of Austin Eckler, who would get a lot of those screens and dump off passes that you were talking about earlier, Coop. And not only that, this kid is 6'9". 6'9".
Kamani Vidal. He's going to get those.
To add him in with the new 6'9" offensive line and Joe Alt that they have, they're going to try to shore up this offensive line. They're going to try to utilize the tight end in this Greg Roman scheme with that run game. A lot of bootlegs, a lot of play action passes. And I think that Donald Parham is going to be that guy this season. He, again, is not going to be one of those players that obliterates the target scene, get you a bunch of targets. But when that counts the most, when they need to get those first downs, when they need to get those touchdowns, you best.
We lost Tipp.
Yeah,
it's all right. We're getting close to the end anyway. I want to thank you, Coop, but I also want to acknowledge something to the crowd. The idea of going for the tight ends was Tipp's, not mine, not Coop's. It was Tipp's. He is one of the young voices upcoming in this industry that I really like. And I want to ask you, Coop, before we sign off, name one person that's not as well known that you've seen a podcast, read an article, you just think that they're sharp and they need more exposure.
Yeah, so I got a guy here. He's actually, what's funny is I found him on Twitter just from his post. He would comment on my posts, and then I followed him, and he's quickly growing. His name is Dan Wisner. right? And people might know him as Wiz. I want to pull up his handle so that we can make sure we give him the correct the correct shout out here. But this guy, and again, he's not affiliated with Fantasy Alarm. He's not. I think he now works with the guys with Jax Falcone and those guys over on Undroppables. But he's just a really sharp, really great dude, and he does it all like you and I for the love of the game. Like there's so many people that you could tell have some sort of ulterior motive. They're looking for engagement. They're looking for this, that. He's out there sharing his insights on his timeline. Everything that he comes up with, he shares with people.
Tell me his handle. I'll type it into the chat.
Yeah, let me grab it right now.
Meantime, everybody follow Coop APS.
Yeah, so it's at Dan J. Wisner, WHISNER. He's got about 2,000 followers, and he should have a lot more than that in mind. WHISNER? That's right. Yep. Dan J. Wisner, known as Wiz over at the Undroppables. And he just does a great job. And again, the stuff he posts, he's got a Patriots podcast, which is cool and all, but like you'll see the stuff he posts, the stuff he shares, all sharp, great content, man. Some big shout out to Wiz, man. And again, no affiliation with me. I appreciate what he does. And it turns out he is a local guy in the area, so I got to link up with him.
Well, this guy is basically affiliated with me, and the young guy and he's not that young, but he's young in the industry that I think needs to have a lot more engagement is at TIPPMAJOR at Tipp Major. Tipp, do you have a young guy that you like that's not that famous?
Say that one more time. It cut out, Greg. I'm sorry.
We're trying to promote some of the lesser known fantasy minds that we've seen either on Twitter or in a podcast that we think is really good, but maybe not as well known.
Yeah, man. There's a ton for me. I'm
just one, buddy.
There's a ton of them, but for me, I'm gonna have to go with. All right, it's a funny name. I love this guy. I'm in a league. I'm actually drafting with him right now. His name is Sleazeball FF. Dude is hilarious. We always kick it together. We always agree, disagree. It doesn't matter. He puts out a lot of great content, but check him out. It's SLEEZEBALLFF. And he's not a sleazeball. The dude is a genuinely nice guy. He just comes out with that moniker. I don't know why he chose that name, but again, he's a really, really cool guy, man. I've enjoyed, doing a little content with him.
Okay, we got started a couple minutes late, and we've gone a couple minutes over our hour. Coop, where can we find your stuff? What is currently, if somebody has to invest some money in some of your content, what should they buy?
Yeah, for us right now, the number one big thing we have going on, and especially because you can use it right now, is our best ball draft guide at Fantasy Alarm. So if you go to fantasyalarm.com/bestball, you can buy our best ball kit. It comes with my rankings, top 240, and I put in a tiered grid, like 6, 6, 6, 6 players. All
tiers of a clown.
So you can, yeah, exactly. So
I like the tiers. I wrote an article about it 20 years ago.
Yeah. We were talking about that, and that way, because with best ball you draft multiple teams, and you can differentiate. So you go in, and it's like you want to draft the same guy every time, and you want to do it. If you really believe in the guy, you want to have a lot of them. But sometimes you got to mix it up. Guys get hurt, things change. So within the tiers, you kind of build your rosters that way. It has my sleepers, busts, everything, my targets as well, because I feel like not people always want to do sleepers, busts. Not enough people write about just the second
opportunities,
8th round guys. Yeah, so it's all in there. You get it as one package, and when you do buy that, we're doing a special thing where typically our Discord is just for members, but if you buy that one standalone package, we get you into the best ball channel for our Discord, and you can draft with us. We do live drafts every Wednesday. It's a lot.
How much?
Yeah, so $25 over at fantasyalarm.com/bestball. Best way to support me, because I do a bunch of stuff for free and all that. If you just enjoy the free content and you want to support me, that's the way to do it.
And everybody, I can tell you, I'm the type of guy that never buys anything because my opinion is the only one that matters. But this year I went out and bought the RSP by Matt Waldman, And so in the next 2 days, I'm going over to Fantasy Alarm and I'm going to buy Coop stuff because I respect him that much. And I want to win. And I was gone for 7 years. I'm still catching up from 7 years off. So I highly recommend that you find somebody who you trust and you purchase their opinion because it helps keep them in the business.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing about this for sharp gamers is that I specifically made it so that you can take that grid and it's in there as an Excel or Google Doc that you can pull out and just kind of use it as a framework. What I do is I just reset it every time I draft and I go through. So you don't always have to pick my guys. You don't have to use it. You just use it as something to bounce off or print it out or do whatever. So it's not like when you buy something like that, you're not saying I'm just going to do what this guy says. What you're doing is you're taking that information and you're absorbing it into what you do and what you know. The way I've done by reading Greg's stuff and listening to Tipp, and Bob Harris when they do their space on Twitter. Like I consume just as much content as I put out because I want to know all the information so I can make my own decision. That's what this stuff is all about.
What people like Coop do for me and Tipp does for me is change my mind. Right. I'll have an opinion and then I'll hear their reasoning and it will change my mind if I agree with their reasoning. If I don't, I'll stay disagreeing. But the bottom line is the more information you have, the better off you are. Tipp, what do you want to close with?
Again, thank you guys for dealing with my craziness and my internet issues. But I do have a question for Coop and Greg. I already know Greg's answer. Travis Kelce, are we going to see a decline this year? What's going on?
No.
Honestly, for me, if I'm playing to win in a dynasty league or a redraft league, it's very difficult for me to even say there's many tight ends I want over him. It might and I'm kind of against the grain in saying that the number one tight end I would want is maybe Mark Andrews, to be honest. But Travis Kelce is right there. And I love Sam Laporta. I was all over him in Dynasty, all these, but I worry a little bit about him for particular formats. And again, I know we're up against it, but I have no problem drafting Travis Kelce. In fact,
we don't have a hard line. We don't have a hard line.
Okay, cool. Right. Yeah.
Bottom line is Kelce now has a speed receiver that can take the top off.
Yes.
Open up those middle routes.
He has two, Greg.
And if you look at what happened at the end of last year in the playoffs, did you see a decline in Travis Kelce? I didn't, not in the playoffs. I'm telling you, he's not. He is number one or number two. Did he finish 3 in your scoring last year?
Yeah.
That's the first time in 7 years that he hasn't been 1 or 2, and he was only 2 one time.
Exactly. Guys, super megastar, and this is the first time he's gotten hurt. He was hurt at the beginning of the year, missed a game.
People don't realize that. He hurt his knee. Missed 2 games, right?
Exactly. And then the thing is, we probably would have got an even better discount on him because towards the end of the year, people were like, oh, he sucks and stinks. But then he was fantastic in the playoffs en route to another Super Bowl championship. And
I saw him.
They extended him another 2 years. So.
Yes.
I saw him drafted at either the end of the second or beginning of the third round in a draft on might have been Big Draft Energy, did a draft show. And he got Kelce and Mahomes at the 2-3 turn, and I think he had the 110 pick. So,
yeah. My last bit of advice, it speaks to this exact topic, is that I don't usually reach on tight ends. I'll take them for if the value falls to me because I put in so much effort into trying to find breakout tight ends, and that my advice is lean into what you're good at. If you love finding breakout running backs, like if you're a true 0 RB guy and you believe you can find those guys, go 0 RB. If you are incredible I have one buddy that is so good at finding wide receivers on waivers, but he drafts like a ton. He starts his draft with like 7 straight wide receivers and doesn't use his superpower. He ends up with like 20 wide receivers on his roster and he comes in 3rd place every year. I'm not going to tell him. Yeah,
Biddy just had me Big Draft Energy. I call him Biddy because he's an old Biddy. He just had me. He just had me. We talked for a while. I watched his show, And he asked me, did I like it? And I says, what, the show or the draft? I loved the show, but I'm not thrilled with the draft because he went really late on running backs. And you know me, I got to get a good running back. But he did get Kelsey and Mahomes back to back. He can say it was 4-5 turn. It was the 4-5 turn. So into the fourth and beginning of the fifth, I think, but they were relatively close to each other. But getting Kelsey in the fourth round, I took him with 104 in Scott Fish last year and was glad I did. You know, I know he didn't have the year I expected, but he was still a top tight end.
Right.
Yeah.
Like he's a star, man. So I wouldn't fade. You can't fade him beyond that top group. And if people are going to let him slide, take advantage.
Make him. That's right. Yeah. Every player has value at a certain point in the draft. And that's all you need to know. Coop, thank you so much. And we're going to have Coop back during the regular season so he can actually be on a show where he shares his fantasy knowledge. We did a little bit today, but mostly it was about his history. This is a guy you need to be following. And I got to tell you, you're going to be at the Expo.
Oh, yeah.
Go meet Coop at the Expo. Are you drafting live in Boston for Scott Fishbowl?
For Scott Fishbowl, yeah, and it's at the same week as the FSWA conference, the Boston one. So there's going to be a lot of people there hanging out. I'll be drafting. I'm sure Greg will get the video camera out, do some interviews. You know how I like to do it.
Well, did I send you a note asking you to record? I want.
Yeah. So I got to talk to. I got to talk to Bob. Because they're doing like a big thing. Like I think Scott Fish is going to.
I've already talked to Scott about it, and he said I could.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to link up with those guys. We'll try to do it all as one.
Yeah.
One thing
together a video.
We'll talk about this off air. This is behind the scenes.
Wait, one thing that I think that is not behind the scenes, I'm a little disappointed in, Coop. You don't have that thick Boston accent, man. I got a friend from Boston, and this.
Wait a minute, you don't talk the claw in Boston yard?
He's like, talk the card, have it yard. That's all. I'm like, oh my god, dude, what did you just say?
Marky Mark.
Like, no, you got to pocket car. Come on, pocket car.
Yeah, when you get on,
you got to pocket the car.
It's funny because my co-host, he's from north of Boston, and every once in a while it sneaks out. Like, you know, when you do radio and stuff on Sirius XM, they beat that stuff out of you. But every once in a while, my buddy John and Pemba, shout out, J and Pemba 777, absolute megastar in all sports. But every once in a while, we'll start the show and he'll be like, "We're here. We're talking. We're here. We're throwing some dots on some sleepers, guy. You know what I mean?"
You got it. You got the answer.
He's got it. I'm not disappointed.
We got our coffee. We got our donks. We're throwing some dots on some sleepers today. You know what I'm talking about, guy? So you know, but they beat you out of it when you get on the radio.
They might, but they shouldn't, because I got to tell you, your fans love it when they hear it. They really do. Anything that differentiates you. I mean, Howard Cosell was the most famous voice on radio for a long time, and it's not like he was without accent. Right. So
every once in a while the Boston comes out. You know, I got all this. You see it all. You see Pedro.
I see it back there.
All right, Ben Coates or Rob Gronkowski?
It's Gronk. But Ben Coates, my childhood. You know what I mean? He's my childhood.
Well, it's hard to overcome those childhood heroes.
I know it's tough. And the thing is, I've been petitioning for him. The thing was, when he retired, Ben Coates, he was like third in every stat. So for me, I was like Hall of Fame for sure. And then there was like a mini boom with like, Tony Gonzalez and Witten and all these guys, and he just never got in. And I just felt like he should have been in. And now when you look at the stats, it doesn't quite stack up, but it was a different era, you know. So shout out to my man Ben Coates. Shout out to Antonio Gates.
How about my guy, Charlie Sanders?
Oh, is he in the Hall?
You remember Charlie Sanders?
I don't know.
Detroit Lions. Look him up. I don't know if he's in the Hall. I don't know if he's in the Hall, but in my youth, he was the tight end.
He was a dude. Yeah. I mean, Barry Sanders is still my all-time favorite player. No question. Just the
not his dad's.
The way he operated, man. I know, not his dad.
Class act.
Yeah.
Class act.
And just the way he carried himself and how exciting he was, man. You can't beat it.
After every touchdown, he handed the ball, didn't throw it, handed the ball to the referee. Never spiked it.
When I think about Barry Sanders. There's two things that remind me of you, Greg, and two this week that have reminded me of you besides this podcast. We were talking about Barry Sanders, and I thought of you. And then I was talking to my wife. I was like, what do you want to do for Mother's Day? And she said, you know what I'd love to do is just go out for lunch. And she's like, how about we go to Olive Garden? And I was like, Greg, that's my guy. I was like, that's my guy's spot. I was like, I gotta mention on the show. So I'm going on Monday, brother. Now You'll probably have to go now that I brought it.
No. For me, it's Red Lobster more than Olive Garden. I love Olive Garden, but I love those Cheddar Bay biscuits.
Oh yeah, dude. now I might have to throw another hat in the ring, dude. I'll be like, hey, my guy. I talked to my guy here. He said we got. He said,
buy her a lobster. Buy her a lobster. Splurge. Then take her to Thailand and get the same lobster for $20.
So now you're talking about a little more of expensive of Mother's Day, right there, Tip. That's a big leap from going to Red Lobster to going to Thailand, brother.
You'd enjoy it.
We'll go to
Coop, you'd love it there.
Yeah, I'll put it on the list then. I trust your opinion, man. I've been trusting your opinion for a long time when it comes to fantasy football.
I appreciate that. All right, JC, take us home.